Last week, it seemed like everybody was gone, so we could not put on a show. But Mr. John Penline makes his return after being in Boston for about seems like about a month since he hasn't been around. And we're joined by Mr. Matt Geica today. I think I pronounced that name correctly, right, Matt?
You did, yeah. It's tough when you see it. I'm sure there's some cognitive dissonance there with your brain, but I hope you get used to it eventually. Good
I
to be
will.
with
I
you
was gonna
guys.
go. I was gonna go Matt Gachka, but yeah, Matt Geica. He's making his debut today. I'm Mike Waterloo, and we're back with another show here, Pittsburgh Sporting News Videocast. And as you guys have been accustomed to the past 3 or 4 shows, we're waiting on Mr. Gar Berkery. He should be joining when his computer decides it wants to work. So we usually do a player of the week, but if I said that I had one off the top of my head, I would be totally lying to you right now. So I guess we'll just go with Mr. Mark Melanson, I guess. I have no real reason, no real stats to back it up, except that he's been getting hated on as of late and not called an elite closer. So I feel bad for Mr. Mark Melanson. We'll give it to him. But guys, I wanted to start with an interesting discussion I saw on Twitter this week, and that was a column by Chris Muller from 93.7 The Fan. He writes for Beaver County Times, and that was, who is the biggest star in Pittsburgh right now? Is it Sidney Crosby, Ben Roethlisberger, or Andrew McCutchen? Whenever I saw that, I thought it was kind of a no-brainer to me. I thought, okay, it's Sidney Crosby, then McCutchen, then Ben Roethlisberger. But Mahler made a very compelling argument as to why Andrew McCutchen is kind of the top dog in Pittsburgh right now, if you will. I just want to kind of get your thoughts and see what kind of order you put them in. And Mr. Penline, since you've been gone for a while, I'll let you start.
Well, it's really close. I mean, Crosby, just won the Art Ross and the Hart Trophy, MVP and top scorer from last season. He's definitely the best player in the league, I still think. And whereas with McCutchen, I mean, you have to think about guys like Mike Trout. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just Mike Trout that's better than McCutchen. You might argue Carlos Gomez, Mike, but.
Love it.
Um, But at the same time, I think you also have to look at what exactly as far as a star in the city goes, like what exactly are you looking at? Like you can look at all the on the field stuff, but off the field, it seems like McCutchen maybe is a little bit more engaged. Not to kind of bash Crosby because I'm not saying that he's standoffish or anything, but just to I just kind of get the feeling that Crosby's more to himself. He's very quiet in the off season. When they're not playing, you don't really hear much about him. Whereas McCutchen, maybe his name is out there a little bit more, and you see him a little bit more on camera. So I don't know. It's 1 and 1A to me. I mean, Crosby's still accomplished a lot more than McCutchen has, but at the same time, McCutchen's kind of in a sport where your talent doesn't automatically dictate whether or not you're going to be the best player in the league. So I guess I got to go with McCutchen for right now, but I'm sure in the winter I'll change to Crosby.
All right, and how about you, Matt? Are you in agreement with John and Mahler?
I could see the argument for Andrew McCutchen for sure. I think he probably has the most. If you took like a Q rating score of all Pittsburgh sports fans, I think McCutchen might rate the highest. Right now, he's probably at the height of his powers, age 27. That's usually the very peak for a position player in baseball. And, of course, just making the All-Star game as a starter, that's a huge deal. So I think he's got that name recognition nationwide now that he didn't really have for the first couple of years, although we already knew that he was going to be great and was on his way. Sidney Crosby, John's right. He's accomplished a lot more than Andrew McCutchen has. He has a championship, obviously. That's a few years ago now, though, so I think some of the luster has maybe worn off in the eyes of some Pittsburgh sports fans. Not me, though. I still think he's the best player in the game as well. The points are there. His advanced metrics are great, too, if you're into that. So I think on both sides of the aisle, everyone can agree that he's right up there, if not at the very top of the NHL. But there is, I think, some discontent in Pittsburgh around Sidney Crosby and maybe how he handled the injury situation this year with the wrist. But as far as I'm concerned, he's one mega season, one good playoff away from really putting himself into the Pittsburgh pantheon forever and ever. And when you look at Ben Roethlisberger, though, he is at the most, I guess, telegenic position in all of North American pro sports, quarterback for an NFL team. 2 championships. But at the same time, I guess kind of like Sid, he's had some years where maybe he didn't quite go as far, didn't quite do as much as some people might want him to in the postseason. So if you had to say right now, right at this moment, I would guess I would agree with Muller that McCutchen does have a very slight edge at the moment.
You guys think it's more of the side of marketability and not just being the best player in the sport, but the fact that this might sound a little stupid, but Crosby wears a helmet. Ben wears a helmet. You don't fully get to see his face. McCutchen, he wears a batting helmet. You see his full face. He's always out there in just a hat. That people are able to connect to them more because they recognize him. There's 162 games more. And just as far as the marketing aspect, he's on the cover of a video game. He is on magazines. He's everywhere on different websites. Do you guys think that has a lot to do with it, or they're just basing it solely off performance and things he does in the community? John?
He just reminded me that Crosby wasn't on a video game cover, which I still can't figure out. But yeah, I think with McCutchen though, I think you just see like the lighter side a lot. He's like diving back to the base and doing the worm to get up, like just doing goofy things like that, jumping around. At the All-Star game. You don't really see that kind of emotion from Crosby. He's very, bottled. It's just not in his personality to be like that. Ben, Ben's kind of had a reputation for not being the greatest person off the field, and it seems to have, those kind of rumors have seemed to follow him throughout the city. So I just think that when you look at Andrew McCutchen, you see somebody who a lot of little kids like to look up to, whether you believe in, that they should or not. But also I think just a lot of people, they just see like, how outgoing he is and how lighthearted he is, and it's with fans that matters. It's for me, and I'm sure for you guys too. If you're a jerk but you can play, then then play. I have no problem. But for a lot of fans, especially for younger, for the younger fans, I think that, being, a very open personality, helps, and it makes him more marketable.
I think it's pretty interesting that you're almost seeing different career arcs in terms of letting their personality show. With McCutchen, it seemed like he was tentative to really show his full self, I guess, until he did something in the game, and now he feels like he's established himself. He's a popular player. He has a few years in the major leagues under his belt, so he's really letting it all go right now, and I think we're all the beneficiaries of it. He's just fun to watch, whether he's actually playing the sport or just sharing a laugh with someone, doing things off the field that lets you in a little bit more. Whereas I think Ben and Sid have both retracted a bit from the public eye, and I think that just comes down to what John was talking about. It comes down to personality. It's nice, it's great if you have it. McCutchen does, and good for him that he's able to be open, but I don't think we can hold it against Sid or Ben that they're not really people who like to expose different parts of their life besides what's going on in the field. But that's part of the modern marketing machine for any sport, and so I guess Kutch is the best when it comes to the ancillary stuff, the stuff off the field, and it's pretty important. He's really captured, I think, the imagination of Pittsburgh, but also baseball fans in general.
And we're joined late here by Mr. Gar Berkery. Gar, we're discussing Chris Muller's column for the Beaver County Times as who's the biggest star right now in Pittsburgh. McCutchen, Sid, Ben. So far, John, Matt, and I are all in agreement that we actually agree with Muller, even though I didn't think I would necessarily, be it his skill, his play on the field, his star off the field, the work he does, the marketability. What's your take? Are you in agreement with all four of us, I guess?
Well, morning, guys, and apologize for being late. It's great to be with you guys. You know what? I kind of caught the last part of what Matt was talking about, and it seems to kind of parallel some of the thoughts that I had. In both cases, with when you talk about Ben Roethlisberger, he is a little bit more in the public eye, but there is also a lot of people who will tell you some of it when the camera is off is a little disingenuous. Maybe he isn't always what he's cracked up to be. Maybe reputation-wise, that when he's in private or when like I said, the cameras aren't on him, he's maybe not as good a guy as Kutch seems to be. And with Sidney Crosby, he's kind of like a ghost. I mean, you never really see the guy in the public eye. He really is a private type of person, much like Mario Lemieux was. So it's kind of hard to get a gauge on what he's really like when he's not out on the ice. Kutch is the complete opposite. I live here in Slippery Rock, and his fiance is actually a Slippery Rock grad. And I remember running into Andrew McCutchen a couple of years ago, and obviously everybody noticed him and was storming him at one of the local restaurants in town. And the thing that I noticed about him, and obviously it was one experience, but he couldn't have been more friendly, couldn't have been more easygoing with everyone, even though he probably just wanted to hang out with his now fiance. But he just was such a good guy, and maybe some of it is just what you see on the camera, but he really does seem like he's a little bit different. And he came into Pittsburgh at a time when the Pirates were at such a low point. I mean, and there's been a lot of lows in the last 30 years, but when he came into Pittsburgh, it paralleled a lot of what Sidney Crosby was going through. But he came in, he wanted to be a Pirate, and ever since he's been here, he's been tremendous. So, like you said, I kind of agreed with Muller's column too, and I guess I'm agreeing with all three of you also.
Now, do any of you guys think that, because right now I don't even think Ben's in the discussion, but if there was any Steeler, I guess he would be the person you look at as a star on the team, and if you had to compare him to Sid or Andrew, he'd be the person that you would. But is there anybody, once Ben, decides to hang it up, that you can see becoming that new star of the Steelers that you could elevate to that discussion with Crosby and McCutchen? Matt, we'll start with you on that one.
Boy, that's a tough one because they don't have a lot of, I guess, so-called sexy players on the team right now. You look at even just the last couple of drafts. I mean, Jarvis Jones is a good dude, and I think he's going to be a good player for a long time. But it's tough to see him being dynamic enough to take the mantle that, say, someone like James Harrison did for a few years as being like the key point of the defense, along with Troy, obviously. Going back to the 70s and Lambert and the guys there, Jack Ham, that type of personality. I don't think that's in Jarvis Jones's playbook or in his toolkit right now, but you never know. Sometimes it's just like Andrew McCutchen, I think. We didn't really see the personality until the last couple of years. You almost have to let these guys develop and feel more comfortable in the NFL, in this case, if we're talking about the Steelers, before we can expect to see their full personality. If you or I started a new job, we're not going to be quite ourselves right away until we feel like we're established. I think that's just a natural thing. So it's tough to look at it, but yeah, in terms of talent, there's no real, I guess, star level of talent on the Steelers right now, which explains why they are where they are at 8-8 for 2 straight seasons. So there could be a bit of a black hole when it comes to marketability behind Ben Roethlisberger, but luckily for the Steelers, they don't need a star. The crest, the helmet, that sells itself essentially.
John, you in agreement there? I know you're the biggest basher of the Steelers on here.
Well, they're the worst team in Pittsburgh, so yeah, of course
They
am.
are. Yeah.
No, I don't. I mean, the only way that they're going to get somebody to replace that superstar quota or whatever for the Steelers would be if they draft one, and they'd have to draft a quarterback because this is the NFL is the one league where it's all about the quarterback. I mean, if you have a star quarterback, that he's the guy. Nobody cares about the star wide receiver if he's got nobody to throw him the ball. And I just feel like in hockey, I mean, you've got guys like Shea Weber who are they're the he's the leader down in Nashville, and Ovechkin, he's a winger, he's the leader in Washington. There's a lot of good centers. You look at baseball and it's basically your best player, whether it's a pitcher or a position player. So I mean, it could be a center fielder like McCutchen, it could be a shortstop like Troy Tulowitzki. But when it comes to football, it has to be the quarterback. So unless nobody's showing up to see just the outside linebacker rush the offense every single time he's out there. I mean, everybody's looking at the quarterback to see what he can do. The closest.
How about a guy like Adrian Peterson, when he was the star of his team, or Jamal Charles, the star of his team? How about like the other skill positions?
Yeah, but I mean, I just think that for the most part, it's. I mean, can you really compare the marketability of those two guys to Tom Brady or Peyton Manning? I mean, maybe Adrian Peterson, but
Calvin
Adrian
Johnson.
Peterson, What's that?
Calvin Johnson?
But Calvin Johnson, like, I don't know. I just think that when you look at teams are marketed based on who their quarterback is. I just, Peyton Manning and, even the great Tony Romo down in Dallas, Tom Brady, Drew Brees. I mean, these are the teams that people talk about. Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay. I mean, and it's pretty much been proven that if you don't have at least a good or above average quarterback, you're not going to win anything. I mean, Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl last year. He's not a top 5 quarterback, but at the same time, he's not a bum either. I mean, you have to, it's just the one position that you have to have talent on in order to win. And because the league has gone into a passing league for the most part, and it's becoming a higher scoring, or they've tried to open it up to be a more high scoring league. I mean, the quarterback is the guy that's going to get you there the fastest. And I just feel like, people are going to show up. They're going to watch Troy Polamalu. They're going to watch, talented wide receivers, or maybe Le'Veon Bell if he has a couple breakout years. But I mean, it's all going to be centered around the quarterback, and then it always has been in the city. Whether people want to talk about the defense or not, they've won 6 Super Bowls, and all 6 of them have come, between 2 quarterbacks. So that's where I believe it starts and stops.
So what I gather is Landry Jones is going to be the Steelers' next star here in about 5 years, and since he's the quarterback, and they'll turn him into the next Big Ben. And I will say, before he joined my beloved Eagles, Nnamdi Asomugha did have a hell of a promotion with Dick's Sporting Goods in that commercial where his cleats were on fire. So that's pretty sad. He was the Raiders' best player for a while. How about you, Gard? Do you see anybody coming up that can be the face, can be the star of the Steelers?
Well, John hammered the point home pretty well, and I was thinking along the same lines. For the Steelers, you look at all 3 of the players that we're talking about. We're talking about a star center fielder. We're talking about one of the great centers in the game, which is obviously a very important position in hockey, and then a franchise quarterback. Really, like John said so well, if you don't have a franchise quarterback, it's very, very difficult. Sure, you're going to occasionally see a Calvin Johnson and Adrian Peterson, even for the Steelers, a guy like Troy Polamalu. But those players, they tend to be more of an anomaly. Obviously, we're looking at Landry Jones right now, but maybe somewhere along the line in the next few years, maybe the Steelers go out and get a guy who can be that next franchise quarterback, because as John accurately depicted in the NFL, if you don't have a great quarterback, it's very, very difficult to win. So that would probably be the next guy. But, yeah, I don't really see anyone that really sticks out in terms of being that next guy right now on that current roster.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only guy I would consider is Antonio Brown, but I still think he's just not as good as he played last year. He played well over his head. He's going to regress a lot this year. But he's the only person as of this moment I could even make a case for, given his youth, his stats, his ability. But, yeah, I'm with you, John. I don't think that if I had to name somebody, he'd be that person right now. But
I mean, they don't. You have to have somebody who touches the ball every single play. That's kind of my whole. That's kind of my whole thing. I mean, you're not going to see Antonio Brown on every single. I mean, you might because they don't have any other wide receivers. But as of right now, you're not going to. He's not going to touch the ball on every play. And I think that it's just like the point guard in basketball. I mean, those guys get looked at the most because they're usually the ones with the ball. Now, whether or not they're the best player on the field, that kind of determined. It's kind of determined elsewhere. But I just feel like with a quarterback, he's always got the ball in his hand, so everybody's looking at him.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but then I go back to the old argument that everybody uses that Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. That's the example of having a horrible quarterback lead his team. I mean, he touched the ball every time. He's not good. He's not Russell Wilson, even serviceable. Trent Dilfer was a horrible quarterback. It's just that defense just played amazing that year, and he did what he had to do. He was a game manager. For the most part, I mean, there's an exception to every rule. So, yeah, I do agree with you. But I think the star player can be a position other than quarterback, but 90% of the time it will be that guy that they're looking to market. Moving on now, Matt actually was at Consol Energy Center yesterday covering the scrimmage that wrapped up the Penguins player development, prospect development camp, I think it's called. Matt, I believe you said the white team won 6-5, was it? Where's the thing here?
It doesn't really matter. It was 6'4".
6'4". Yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of players out there playing. So,
Yeah.
who stood out for you, and who can fans keep an eye on these coming years?
Well, I think it was really encouraging, and maybe the guy who got the most buzz out of the crowd, outside of Sam Lafferty from Hollidaysburg, just outside of Altoona. Of course, he got the rise out of people, and so did Jake Hildebrand, who played goal. He's a Butler native, plays at Michigan State right now. But the real crowd pleaser was Kasperi Kapanen, which is nice when he's your first-round pick. And, you know, the Pens haven't taken a difference-making forward in the first round for several years now. Obviously, that was by choice most of the time because of the previous administration's focus on defense. And, you know, we can debate back and forth whether or not that's going to help or hurt this franchise, not just now, but in the near future. But at the same time, it was exciting to see a real prospect, a legit prospect on the ice, someone who could make the team, someone in Kapanen who's played in a senior men's league over in Finland, so he's played against physically mature players. He is kind of small, but some dazzling moves on the ice yesterday. Didn't get any points in the scrimmage, but from talking to other media members there at Consol yesterday afternoon, it was more of the same from what we've seen from him, from what they saw from him over the course of the week. I guess he's got some cockiness to him as well, which is nice to see. You're going to need that to step right in to the NHL and contribute, but pretty exciting because the Penguins have not had really any difference makers come up from their system, be drafted by them at forward since Jordan Staal, really. So it has been a while. It's been, 6-7 years since Staal was drafted, first draft pick from Ray Shero, actually, back in 2006 it was. So that was nice to see out of him. I thought Scott Harrington, speaking of the top defense prospects, he was quietly good. I don't think he's going to be flashy by any means, but I think the Penguins, they have flashy. And they have Chris Letang, obviously, for many years to come. And they have Derek Pouliot, who was, I believe, hurt or just precautionarily sitting out the scrimmage yesterday. But those are two of the guys with a high-end offensive talent. But you need your Scott Harringtons, who was a second-round pick a few years back, to help anchor that. And in goal, I also liked what I saw from Matt Murray, who was a draft pick of, I believe, 3 years ago now, or maybe even 4 at this point. But you hear a lot about Tristan Jarry, but I think we shouldn't forget Matt Murray had a really good season with Sault Ste. Marie in the Ontario Hockey League. So he's performed at a high level, at the highest level you can get at as a junior. So I think he's someone to look to in the future. And just a couple other guys, Mattia Marc-Antoine. I had to work on that name before I came on the air, but a fourth rounder of a couple years back, really good speed. He looked excellent, as did Jake Gensel, second-round pick last year. So it does seem like finally the Penguins have some forwards that you can project, not just Kapanen, but also the two I just mentioned there, in Gensel and Marc-Antoine, some players who might be able to be a top 6 forward, or maybe even a top 9 forward, if we dare to dream for the Pens in that regard. It's been a while, so that was nice to see in person yesterday.
I'm going to ask you an unfair question and put you on the spot here, but from what you saw in that very short time from Murray or Jarry, could you see either one of them taking over, being a potential goalie replacement for Fleury if they decide not to re-sign him?
And yeah, I think Matt Murray's closer. He's older, and let's be honest, that's a huge deal for goalies. Usually it takes a while, and they reach their peak in their late 20s in a lot of cases, and we've seen that in the league for a long time. Murray's only 20, though, so he did play, I think, 2 games for Wilkes-Barre Scranton last spring, so he presumably will be with the Penguins AHL club this season. So I think perhaps he's groomed. I know Thomas Greiss, the signee they picked up as free agency started earlier this month. I think he's going to be your first option, but it is nice for the Pens to have Murray, and then maybe a couple of years down the line, Tristan Jarry. But as far as options, I do think the Penguins have them, which is nice.
All right, and we're going to shift gears here, get into a little bit more Pirates talk since we're about midway through the show. Have some things I want to get into. Looks like Starling Marte is going to be held out of the lineup again. Why he wasn't taken out of the game originally, whenever he got drilled in the head with a 93-mile-per-hour pitch, is unreal, and I think somebody should answer for that. That's not right. Anytime, even if he seems fine, you take him out with how concussions are now in sports. But let's talk about Gregory Polanco a little bit. And, before he got called up Matt, before you're on the show, I was just hyping up, like, people are just all about this kid. He's not going to come up here and hit 330. He's going to come up here and struggle like every rookie does. But he kind of broke that, and he came up here and he just tore the cover off the ball nonstop. But it seems like now he's hitting that rookie struggle wall, if you will. He's 3 for his last 30. He had a 2-hit game the other night. So is this anything to be concerned about, or is this just kind of, what we've been talking about with George Springer, John Singleton, Oscar Taveras have faced, where they just kind of, the pitchers have made adjustments to them, and they're just trying to adjust and get used to the game. Gar, is that what you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time, and we even saw it with Yasiel Puig. I mean, he was, the natural last year, but he eventually went through his own troubles last season. That's exactly what's going on, Mike. I mean, you had suggested very early on in the process that this was going to happen. It generally does with these young, talented players. And, the real key is, okay, the pitchers have adjusted to you. Now you've got to make your own adjustments. And the nice thing about Gregory Polanco, and the thing that I kind of like a little bit more about him than maybe a guy like Starling Marte when he came up, is Gregory Polanco, at least for a 21, 22-year-old prospect, seems like a guy who's got a lot of maturity. He has a really strong mind. He doesn't seem like someone who's going to falter mentally, and that's going to be really big because when you get to major league pitching, and I know John can add to this because he's got a lot more experience, you're seeing just a totally different caliber of pitcher, and these guys adjust. Even if they've never seen you before, they get plenty of film on you. They find out where your weaknesses are after they've watched some tape on you, and he's going to have to figure out how to deal with that before he's going to take the next step. But I really do believe he can, and he might even be able to do it within the remainder of the second half.
John, you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I don't really think he's playing that bad. I just feel like since he's come up, I think he's kind of run into pitchers that have a little bit more movement than you see in AAA. I mean, he's not striking out that much. He's got 30 strikeouts in like 78 games, so under half as many strikeouts as games. But I mean, Gar, you talked about the maturity, and I agree 100%. And that was one of my arguments before he even came up was, everybody talks about how great his plate discipline is down there. And I feel like, he's been able to work the count a lot. He's not – there are times where he'll hit the ball hard like he did last night and it'll just be right at somebody. There's also times where, he'll get a pitch that's kind of grooved and he'll pop it up. I mean, it happens. Over the course of a season you're going to have slumps. It looks bad because he came up and he was hitting like 390 and now he's down to 255, but it's a very small sample size and it's just a lot to be encouraged about. I mean, George Springer has been off the charts with his power, but he's also got 120 strikeouts. And,
that's his career. That's what he's going to be forever.
Wow. Yeah, and that's fine, but I just feel from when it comes to Polanco, I mean, the patience is there. And I just feel like once he gets more adjusted to seeing, major league pitchers and seeing the type of movement that are on these pitches, because he's only missing them by like that much, and you only need to miss it by that much, to get a pop-up or a ground ball instead of a home run or a line drive. So I think, once he'll break out of it, I really, really like the plate discipline. It's just something that, at the age of 21, 22, you just shouldn't have. And Marte is like the complete opposite. I mean, he swings at everything, and that's something that he's going to have to work on probably for most of his career. But for Polanco, he's already got that. So I think he'll be perfectly fine. Luckily, Josh Harrison is having like, the season of his life. And, hopefully, Polanco will be able to kind of get hot down the final stretch the way that, kind of in the same way that Garrett Cole did, as a pitcher, in late August and September. I mean, you're looking on these guys to kind of make an impact once they've been here for a couple months, and hopefully Polanco is going to, be able to do that.
And I mean, last night he hit the ball well too. He made good contact. It was just right at them, so you can't really get mad at that. That's very encouraging, I think, to see that. And yeah, Josh Harrison has played 6 great weeks of baseball, and that's about it this year. He still sucks. So Matt, what's your thought? Do you think Polanco is going to be coming around? Do you think it's just a typical rookie thing, in agreement with all of us, basically?
Well, yeah, I'll piggyback on I think what John said about the plate discipline. God, has he been good at recognizing pitches? I think that's I don't know if it's an innate gift. I know some guys have better vision than other guys. That's part of it as well. But we've seen with Pedro Alvarez, I think maybe this year finally he's bumped that walk rate up a little bit. He's starting to recognize breaking balls quicker out of the hand of the pitcher. But for Polanco, it just appears to be a native gift for him. And not to downgrade any work that he's done in that area in the minor leagues and now obviously in MLB, but that is something I don't think we'll have to worry about with him, and maybe a reason you can keep him in that top of the lineup spot and really have him grow into that at the major league level. That's another thing too. He's still young enough, and he's still only a few years into being a position player. He was a pitcher when the Pirates first scouted him, which you do see glimpses of that when he makes the throws from the outfield, of course, but it's still a refinement, and baseball is a game where, your peak comes a little bit later because you just have to get those reps, and he's getting him at the top level, and he should be at the top level right now. He deserves to be, and he can produce, but it's just going to be a process with him. Like we see defensively, he doesn't look the greatest out there. You see some of that sick giraffe that Rene Gallo saw back in the Dominican Republic, I think, when he's chasing after some balls, but we saw en route a couple nights ago, I think he was working on before Friday night's game, going back to the wall, putting his hand there to realize that he has some space. We've seen some awkwardness there, both there and at the plate. But really the building blocks are there, and he'll always be able to lean back on that plate discipline and that pitch recognition, which helps. And like you talked about, Michael, he just missed – well, he really didn't miss the pitches last night. He drilled them, but they were right at fielders. So maybe the All-Star break was what he needed to get recalibrated and get ready to go for the second half.
The bad thing about the All-Star break for the Pirates is they were playing very well before, so it might have came at a bad time. Or actually, no, that's whenever they lost to 2 good teams again, which they do all year, because I still think this is a team that's not very good. We discussed this a couple weeks ago. Gar, Matt Shetler, and myself, I said I don't buy into the Pirates because they haven't won a series against a team over 500. That's currently over 500 since the Dodgers at the end of May. They keep beating up on these teams that aren't too good, and that's why they are where they are. But they're only 2.5 back out of first place. They're currently in 4th right now. But with all the injuries that the rest of the division is having, and the Brewers regressing like we all thought they would to some point, I still think they're much better than the Pirates overall. But with the injury to Yadier Molina, and he's the Andrew McCutchen of the Pirates, the one player that team cannot afford to lose for an extended period. Joey Votto being horrible and hurt. Brandon Phillips getting hurt for the Reds. Even Aroldis Chapman, I think, is minor, but he tweaked something during the All-Star game. This is the time the Pirates have to strike if they want to make the playoffs again. And if they do that, everybody thinks they need to make a trade. And John Penline, eerily enough, your little lower third quote there is, please trade for Ian Kennedy. Is that the one target right now that you want to see the Pirates go out and get from San Diego since they're in full sell mode?
Yeah, I feel like, obviously if they could get David Price, that'd be great, but I'm not a big fan of giving up big-time prospects for a guy like David Price. I don't think it would be worth it. I know a lot of people will probably go crazy and say, hey, they're winning right now, so trade everybody away and buy all the free agents. But for me, Ian Kennedy is a much more affordable guy. He's a guy who's pitched extremely well, especially in the month of July. I think he's kind of turned things around. He hasn't been that great at home, and he pitches in San Diego, so you can't really blame it on the ballpark there either. But I just feel like he would definitely be an upgrade. He would be a guy that would definitely help the rotation. And he's got 1 more year of control, so you can have him next year. And if he pitches really well next year, you can maybe talk about extending him even. So it's not going to be a rental. It's a guy that you can use to kind of bridge the gap for the next echelon of starting pitchers. I don't know what the asking price would be on that. I know that Houston Street, the Angels gave up like half their barn for Houston Street, which I don't really understand because he's a reliever. But but I do think that they need some help. And Neil Huntington has gone on twice, as far as I've seen now, and said that he doesn't see any major holes with this team. And I agree with him to an extent, but I don't really see any strengths either. I know that you could probably look at the outfield and say, well, you've got McCutchen and Polanco and Marte have a lot of talent, and Josh Harrison's playing well. But other than that, I mean, the shortstop is so off and on. I mean, Mercer had a great hit last night to win the game, but he's also booted the ball around the yard a couple times. Neil Walker's kind of up and down. They don't have a really good first baseman, and you have no idea what's going to happen over at third. And then of course you look at the starting pitching. I think that they could use a little bit, at least one more arm, and they could also use another bullpen arm. So I don't know. I'm with you, Mike. They're winning a lot of games right now. They're 5-6 games over 500, but they've done nothing over the last couple months but just beat really horrible teams that are in dead last place. So you can only play your schedule, but when the Cardinals come to town, when the Dodgers come to town, to start this week, I mean, you're going to need to take those games, and we'll see where they're at, and hopefully they're able to make some moves by the end of the month.
And the Pirates were actually one of the teams that were scouting Ian Kennedy the other night. And I mean, I do want to know what he would draw. I mean, everybody around Pittsburgh will say, oh, give Travis Snyder and Michael Martinez, and you'll have a deal. You'll get Ian Kennedy. But last year, Bud Norris, even you saw the asking price for him whenever that information got leaked on the Deadspin article. Pirates were going to give Luis Heredia in a first round in the first round pick, I believe, or the compensatory pick. There we go, the comp pick for Bud Norris. Is that a move you'd make? Maybe Heredia in a pick for Kennedy, or if they need a first baseman or an outfielder, would you maybe say, okay, Josh Bell for Ian Kennedy, something like that? Would that be fair value for you, John?
I would do Luis Heredia and a comp pick for Ian Kennedy, absolutely, but I wouldn't give up Josh Bell for that. I feel like Josh Bell is a blue chip. I really do. I feel like he's a guy that you're either going to see him on the field at PNC Park, hopefully playing first base, or he's going to be in another uniform a couple years down the road, and it's going to be because you traded him for a big chip, like a guy, I guess kind of like David Price, but obviously you would need a lot more than just Josh Bell for that, but still a guy that you would throw into a deal like that. Josh Bell for Ian Kennedy, I think would be, even straight up would be overpayment in my opinion. I guess I fall guilty to being somebody who values prospects way higher than I should, but I just feel like you have to be extremely careful if you're the Pirates because you've spent so many years building up your farm system and you're able to get some of these guys before the stupid draft signing rules, and you're kind of loaded up right now, and you don't want to just throw these guys away on guys that'll help you but won't be team changers or guys that'll push you to the World Series.
But teams do this every single year at the trade deadline. You saw the haul for Matt Garza last year. I mean, Mike Olt, Grimm, Edwards, Neil Ramirez. I mean, teams who are sellers have such an upper hand, even what the Padres got for Houston Street, because, like you said, he's a reliever, he's a closer, and people overpay for them year after year and do not learn their lesson that you can pull anybody out of the bullpen and make them close. I hate closers more than anything, but yet they get so much in return. And I think for Ian Kennedy, the Padres are going to start at the top and try to work down a little bit, but the Pirates being the Pirates, I think they're with you, John. They're not just going to give up that farm system that they have built up for a guy like Ian Kennedy. Yeah, who can help? I mean, he's no more than, a 3-4 starter maybe? I mean, who knows in Pittsburgh? He could be their ace with all the issues they have right now. And I know we were texting back and forth a little bit. We were talking about some different trades. You said, there goes Houston Street. He's off the books. You might have a guy in mind, so if you do, let me know. But what about a guy like Joaquin Benoit, who's the new closer for the Padres now, but they're looking to ship him out of there too?
Well, I love listening to you guys because you guys do a tremendous job with the baseball. It's fun to listen to. It's funny. I'm with John. It's too bad while we were drooling over Bud Norris last year, we didn't get a little bit more proactive and get in Ian Kennedy in town last year. I'm with you guys also. Josh Bell to me is untouchable at this point, unless, like you guys said, we're looking at a major piece. You know, the Pirates spent $5 million to sign this guy, to convince this guy to come on board. So, but as far as Benoit is concerned, I don't know, Mike. He doesn't seem to me like someone who's really going to change the whole trajectory of this team right now. If I'm going to make a deal, and I'm not going to claim this is an original idea because it's something that I actually read last night, but it really made a lot of sense. If I'm going to make a deal that I would really consider would be shipping Pedro Alvarez to the Chicago Cubs for their first baseman, Anthony Rizzo. And Rizzo would make a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. He signed through 2021 with team options, and he's relatively affordable. You're basically trading power bat for power bat, and you're filling in a position of need at first base, because I don't think anyone's going to say that Ike Davis has been able to do the job. Sure, we hear what a great second-half player he is, but I'm not convinced. And, you know, Pedro Alvarez, let's face it, he's not re-signing with the Pirates. You've got to deal with the fact that you're dealing with Scott Boras, beyond the fact that it just doesn't seem like he's all that intrigued in staying here long-term. The Cubs have been stockpiling talent, saving money. They have the ability to not only re-sign Pedro Alvarez, Mike Alt, he doesn't look like he's going to be the guy at third base. We hear what a great prospect he is, but he got shipped back down to AAA, if I remember correctly. And for all the bad talk about Pedro Alvarez, he looks pretty good in comparison. I think there could be some intrigue there, but, you know, it's just a thought. I mean, I just, to answer your initial question, I don't know that adding, you know, a bullpen arm that's probably no better than Tony Watson or Mark Melanson's really going to make much of a difference. And last point, I'm in total agreement with you, Mike. This and John, I don't think this team has the look of a playoff team, and it certainly doesn't look like a team that if it gets there can win. You got to stockpile your prospects right now. Hedge your bets over the next 3 or 4 years, and don't do anything stupid right now. You know, you're probably an 85 to 90 win team at best, and you know, you guys are right. I mean, the schedule gets very, very difficult over the next few weeks, so we're going to find out a lot. It's too bad that the trade deadline is July 31st, because it would be nice to see what this team looks like, you know, in 3 or 4 weeks once they have some really difficult series, Giants, Dodgers, Cardinals. So we're going to know a lot then, but unfortunately the deadline will pass.
And Matt, any players that you're keeping an eye on right now that you would love to see in Pittsburgh, you think the Pirates can make a serious push for?
David Price. Outside of him, though, seriously, I wouldn't do anything to the starting staff. I don't know if you're going to say anything there, Michael, but
I was just going to say, I mean, the price for Price, I mean, no pun intended there, would be ridiculously high. I mean, Glass.
Pricey.
Yeah, it'd be very pricey. You'd have to give up Glasnow, Kingham, Bell, you know, and I think that's just the start of it right there.
Yeah, I think so too, and I do know that general managers and other executives have been saying that teams are now valuing their prospects too highly, and I would agree with that. The market has shifted in the other direction, whereas, you know, 5-10 years ago, it was the opposite. Guys valued veterans, so it's tougher to make these deals, and so I think if you're in the case of the Pirates, I'm somewhat in agreement with you guys that you hang on to what you have. I'd like to see another bullpen arm. I'm not a big Jared Hughes believer. I think he got lucky again last night with that line-out double play, but beyond that, he's been outperforming his peripherals. They need that one more guy, and, you know, maybe it's Frieri down the road if Siraj can work his magic. He had a nice outing last night, but at the same time, they're just missing one more to take some of the load off of Melancon and Watson and Wilson, all of whom who have been pretty good over the past couple of weeks, especially. I'm with you on that player of the week there, Michael, about Mark Melancon. I think it's hard to ask for much more out of him. You're going to have your hiccups, but as far as the Pirates go, I think they're right there. I think they're close. I know they haven't beaten a lot of good teams, especially not in their division, but you look back to the past week before the All-Star break, they were right there in every game against St. Louis. They have bullpen blow-ups, and of course you factor that into. That's been a bugaboo this season. And against the Reds, they had Game 1 of that Series 1 and should have taken 2 out of 3. So they're not getting blown out by the good teams. I think they're just as good as any team in the Central right now, especially when you consider those injuries that you brought up. And I know, Gary, you talked about the deadline, but remember last year the Pirates' 2 biggest additions were before the waiver deadline in August. So there is some time. It is a little bit more difficult, but I think we saw that you can still get the players you want. It takes more of a process, obviously, but you can still get the players you want for the most part, even in the month of August, as compared to right now when everyone's rushing for the non-waiver deadline.
I agree, Matt. The only problem, I'll make it real quick. The only problem with that I see potentially is there's just so many teams right now that are in the playoff hunt. Now, obviously, we're going to see that tree pruned a little bit. We're going to see some teams fade a little bit. Maybe the Pirates will be one of them. But the only problem with that waiver deadline is you start running into a situation where you might have 6, 8, maybe 10 teams that all think that they still have a chance for one of those wild card spots. So you're definitely right, but that would be a worry.
I hate that additional wild card spot so much because it really messes up the trade deadline. I just hate everything, Sonny. Especially hate that.
I think it's great. I love it.
I despise it so much. I cannot stand it.
Well, Matt, we can be the glass half full guys.
What was that?
Matt, we can be the glass half full guys here today.
Well, it's not even that. It's it puts additional value on that division championship, which I love. Say if the Pirates can get that, they can avoid the whole wild card scenario. So I think it's the best of both worlds. You get more teams involved, and at the same time, you reward the teams who are in that top 3.
That's what makes baseball so special, though. Before that, there was only 8 teams that made the playoffs. Unlike football, unlike hockey, unlike basketball. Even before you had both wild cards. The goal of every team was still to win the division, but now you can miss the division crown by 1 game, and you can have 1 off game like any team can throughout the year, and your whole season is done. If you want to have a different wild card, at least make it a best of 3 series, a best of 5 series. I hate the sudden death in baseball. There's no need for it. It's right up there with replay for me, and I hate replay, and I hate that wild card. John, what were you gonna say?
So yeah, in the 60s, you just had to win the league and you'd be in the World Series. And now that they've expanded it to the Championship Series, then the Divisional Series, then the Wild Card, I mean, I love it. I agree, though. I do agree that the 1-game playoff is stupid. Like, it should be a 3-game series, but I'd like to see more teams in it. I like to see, and they'll never do this because the unions will just go nuts, but I'd like to see more scheduled doubleheaders and start the playoffs earlier and have an expanded playoff. I mean, people don't – baseball is not really that popular. I mean, it's not nearly as popular as it was even 25, 30 years ago, but I just feel like if you want to draw even more interest, I mean, have more teams involved. Make it so that, I mean, we're in the middle of July right now. I mean, how many people, out there are fans of teams that – are like 5 games back, but they pretty much know they have no chance of making it. I mean, that's really tough to try to endure the last 3 months of the season. So, I don't know. I think you got to expand it, and even if it means cutting down regular season games or having more doubleheaders, which they'll never do. But I just feel like you need more teams in the playoffs because that's where all the money is.
If it was a 3-game or 5-game series, I'd be okay with the wild card. I hate the 1-game elimination thing. I think it's something they really need to change. For that reason, I like the more teams too in a way, but you can't have the one and done. That's my biggest issue with it. And as far as the trade guys, I'd love to see Benoit. I'd love to see not even as a closer, just help that bullpen that hasn't been that good this year at all. Him and Watson setting up for Melanson, who I do think is a good closer, would be great. And I know I'm in the minority here, but if the Rays that wanted Nick Kingham, Glasnow, and if they wanted Josh Bell, I'd say, where do I sign? Let's do this right now. I know I'm crazy, but I don't value prospects as much as other people do, and I realize that's the way the Pirates have to win. But if the Pirates want to take advantage of this window that they have the next 2 years, I go ahead and do it. And that leads me to a talk that I saw on Twitter today between our good friend DD, who's in Iowa right now, I believe. He's going to be hopping on with us here in a few weeks. He'll be back after the Power finally end their season, thank God. And Pat Lackey, YGAVs, they were talking about, they don't really see they don't think the Pirates are as good as last year's team, but by the end of the year, they can see them get much better. And Pat brought up an interesting point, saying at the beginning of next year, he could see the Pirates being the sweetheart pick to win the World Series because there's one of those teams every single year. And that really made me think, and I kind of agree with him. Depending on how the Pirates end the season, with all the young talent they have, they can look at the injuries, they can look at whatever, and you can look at them as kind of that dark horse pick, or that feel-good story that everybody's going to be picking throughout baseball. Do you guys kind of agree with that, and can you see that happening next year, Gar?
Sure. I think the Pirates, we keep going with this broad theme of, are the Pirates good enough to win this year? And I think probably all four of us would agree, probably not. I mean, anything can happen. You can get on a hot streak. We've seen wild card teams advance to the World Series, win a World Championship. But, saying it out loud today, I don't think any of us would really believe that the Pirates are good enough this year to get it done. Next year could be a different story. I mean, you think about the possibility of a guy like Nick Kingham joining the staff after being called up probably sometime in August this year. Hopefully, with a little bit of luck, you add our pitcher that just had the Tommy John this past year. Thank you, Jameson Taillon. I mean, you're going to upgrade your staff. Hopefully they're going to be young, but we've seen young pitching staffs have success in the past. Gregory Polanco with a full year under his belt. Starling Marte may be coming around. Anthony Rizzo at first base. I kid. But, I mean, seriously, the next couple of years look like, the big window for this team. And I could definitely see them having a real good chance. But, boy, the division is tough. Really, really tough. Sorry about my dog.
Cubs are only going to get better, too, with all that young talent they do have. John, can you see the Pirates being the feel-good pick to win the World Series next year? Maybe the Nationals, the Rays, the Royals, the Marlins.
The Royals.
People loved in the past 2 years, including this guy right here.
Yeah, what are they doing now?
They're about 3 games out of the wild card spot.
Yeah. No, I don't see it. As long as the Cardinals are in that division, I just don't see it. I mean, and there's so much that can happen, stating the obvious, between now and then. I mean, the Cardinals are one of the teams that are in serious talks with David Price, and it really comes down to whether or not he'll sign an extension. And if they get him, and he does, then you've got Adam Wainwright and then David Price, or you can flip them either way you want. In that division. In a 3-game series, you have to face those two guys. I mean, that's going to be really tough. Even if they don't get Price, that team is just loaded with pitching, top to bottom. They're still the class of the National League Central, and until the Pirates prove otherwise, I mean, I have to pick the Cardinals to at least win that division. And if they win the division, then it seems to me that they would stand to be better than the Pirates. So. They still have a lot of old pieces. I mean, Molina's getting up there. I mean, Matt Holliday is not nearly the player he used to be, but I have to see it to believe it.
And Matt, real quick with you, and then we're going to get into our final words here to wrap up the program.
I think it might be a case where the Pirates' best chance is this year to win, considering how the division is looking and with those injuries. And I'm kind of kidding about that because I do know that they're going to continue to, hopefully the young players continue to improve and you have more help from the farm. But I look at the Cardinals, and I'll disagree with you on this one, John. I don't think the Cardinals have a lot coming up after Tavares. Their lineup does not impress me that much at all this year. And they really just lost Carlos Beltran. But at the same time, I would match up the Pirates lineup now and in the future against theirs favorably, I would say. Yeah, pitching is another thing, and you have to look to who's coming up. But, step one's winning the division. I don't know about the World Series and being a trendy pick next year. That could be a possibility. I still think you have to get Jameson Taillon back to relative health before you can really make a projection on that. But I think people are anxious to pick new teams always, so that always opens the door for fresh blood like the Pirates, who have now been around for a couple of years, and people know that they at least have the potential of hanging in a race. And this season could tell us a lot, because if you see that big improvement, as like Pat Lackey was talking about on his blog recently, all of a sudden the ceiling goes up in a hurry. So the next couple of months could determine where we really see this franchise going in the future, because if they finish in the playoffs again, they're more attractive to free agents. That helps as well. And, of course, it all depends on how much they want to spend. But you keep building that positive feeling that you saw last year, build on top of it. I think this year is huge in determining how they stand in terms of baseball for the next few years.
All right, and we are going to get into our final words here. I'm going to go Gar, Matt, John, then I know Gar has to go to Pirates game. Matt has a prior engagement, and I think John's just sitting around the house all day today. So, Gar, we'll let you start.
It was a lot of fun being with you guys today. Thanks for having me join you. Sorry for being late. A lot of talk revolving around Andrew McCutchen. He's certainly getting a lot of due nationally, and it's great to see. He's probably the most underpaid player in all of professional sports right now. I mean, he is at least the most underpaid superstar in all of sports. And the Pirates need to really think long and hard after this season. They've got 3 years of incredible bargain out of one of the best players in baseball. They need to seriously consider tearing up that contract, talking to Andrew McCutchen about redoing his deal. The best players in the game right now are getting paid nearly $30 million a year, really $30 million plus. You're going to find out whether or not Andrew McCutchen really wants to stay in Pittsburgh. If you can get this guy to sign a 5 or 6 year deal, somewhere in the $20 to $25 million range, I think it's time for the Pirates to step up to the plate and make that guy your franchise guy once and for all. It might be crazy to some people, but it's time to at least be having those discussions once the season is complete.
All right. And Matt, go ahead.
I'll draw upon personal experience from yesterday. I know that, I think we take for granted right now how popular hockey is in Pittsburgh, but it's not like this in a lot of cities around the nation. You can say Boston, certainly Chicago, Detroit, but going to that, it's a scrimmage, basically. It's a draft pick scrimmage. It lasts about an hour and a half, and I know attendance was free, but I had a hard time getting into Consol Energy Center yesterday. I thought I could just pull up maybe and not get into any congestion or traffic, but it's just great to see real hockey junkies in this town. I know there have always been a few, and that's grown over the years from Lemieux to Yager to now Crosby and Malkin era, but I continue to be blown away by the level of enthusiasm. The Penguins need to take advantage of this and continue to build that brand loyalty. I think they are doing a good job of that because you're not always going to have the best player in the world, although it may seem like it here in Pittsburgh, like it's a birthright, but it wasn't in the 60s and 70s. So they need to take advantage of what they have right now, continue to get the youngsters involved, continue to grow the grassroots. But at the same time, I just marvel over how far the sport has come. Even in 10 years or 15 years when I first got into it, it was sometimes like talking about your own little secret when it came to the Penguins, but now they're right up there with any team in Pittsburgh as far as I'm concerned, especially among the younger demographic. And for a hockey junkie like myself, I'm one of them, obviously. It really is fun to see.
Can't agree more. John, go ahead. I know you've been waiting a few weeks for this one, so go ahead.
Wow, Matt, that was awesome and really enthusiastic. I think what I'm about to say might force all of our listeners to drink. Yeah. I've been reading, stupidly, I've been reading a lot of ESPN in the NFL section, and I've seen a lot of people picking the Steelers to win the division this year, and I just don't understand why. I understand that they've had a lot of, drafts. I can't even say a lot of good draft picks because they really haven't, but when I look at this team, nothing has really improved. We can say that the defense may get a little bit faster, that maybe they added some more playmakers on offense, but it's just like with the Pirates trying to contend next year for the World Series. I have to see it to believe it, and this has been an 8-8 team the last 2 years, and they've drafted some guys that everybody thinks that they could make a serious difference, and I believe in that as well to an extent, but until I see it happen, I refuse to believe that a team that is still getting older at its key positions is going to finish any better than 7-9 or 8-8. So hope I'm wrong. Never usually happens, but I seriously think that the Steelers will be looking more at third place than first.
I'm with you there. I see another 8-8 season at best. We're going to get into our football preview next week's show, hopefully. And mine, real quick to wrap it up, I see our other two left us because they had places to go. But I'm going to say that aside from the replay, the MLB's biggest issue they have to address is deciding what they want to do with this All-Star game, if it's going to be worth something or if it's not, if you're going to have a guy like Derek Jeter start, if you're going to have different pitchers pitch every single inning, if you're going to have the home field advantage, because if this is an exhibition game like it's supposed to be, like it always was made to be, then Adam Wainwright grooving one to Derek Jeter would not matter. It would not be a big deal, but because all of a sudden Bud Selig wants this game to mean something, to decide home field advantage, which is just ridiculous in the World Series, it does. So baseball really needs to get a grip with that and decide what it wants to do. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back next week with whoever wants to join me on here. We'll be talking some NFL, some who knows if the Pirates make any trades. Maybe they get Anthony Rizzo for Pedro Alvarez. Who knows what can happen in the next 7 days? But whatever it is, we'll have it covered here. So we'll see you next week, Pittsburgh. Take care.